In this demo, we're going to start by building out an environment that is going to be useful for us to apply some kind of landscape material to. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll get started. So first things first, typically what I do when I'm going a little too fast here, let's use the trick here. What I'm doing is I use WASD and then I roll the mouse wheel up and down to create more speed. I'm going to go ahead and delete the fog. I'm going to go ahead and set my lights up. I think I'll leave it at 3.14 lumens. I'm going to go ahead and very quickly place a new actor. Go to post process volume. Go to exposure. Kind of stuff that they pay you in when they want you to work for free. Exposure is great if it's a place that can actually give you any. Most places can't. So 1 and 1. And then we're going to scroll down and set infinite extents. There we go. That's going to average out our lighting. That's fine. We don't need the adaptive eye correction just now. And I'll leave this at the ground here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use that base material that I made. So let's go ahead and pop this open. Oh, did I miss? There we go. That's just going to be there so that I can use it to be able to see. We're going to get rid of our sphere reflection capture actor. Now, because Lumen is on, I don't need to set these lights up as dynamic because they're going to set up as dynamic anyway, but let me go ahead and set them up as dynamic anyways because it just makes me feel a little better. Whoa, getting some weird visual glitches there. We're going to go into our landscape. Now, I'm going to place this a little bit below the ground so that we don't have to replace the ground. I think that'll be fine. Let's double check to make sure that it's actually placed properly. Nope, a little bit lower. There we go. I think that'll be fine. Now, I'm not going to do anything over here, at least for now. I'm just going to sculpt an environment. I'm just going to sculpt the ground, and then I'll show you guys how to build one. And then we'll go into landmass, and I'll show you how to use that. Let's go ahead and hit create. All right. Let's go ahead and check to make sure our engine scalability is set to epic. Getting some weird drawing stuff on the screen, but everything seems to be okay. I'm just getting some virtual machine problems. Let's hit play to test to see that we are actually able to see and look around. Yes, we are. Everything looks good. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. So, the first thing that I like to do whenever I'm working on a landscape and I'm working on the default level size is I'm going to go over here immediately to noise, and I'm going to actually build out some noise. So I'm going to set my tool strength relatively low, something like 0.01, and then I'm going to set my noise mode to both, and my noise scale I'm going to set up as high as I can get it. And then I'm going to change my brush size. So let's go ahead and set the brush size to something fairly large. And we'll set the fall off to, I don't know, like 0.6. There we go. So initially, what I like to do whenever I'm sculpting an environment, at least by hand, and this helps if you're using the Wacom pen, is I like to apply noise because noise sets up my basic forms and kind of create something a little bit at random. This is like if I'm not trying to create something exact. If I'm trying to build exactly an environment that I have in reference, I will reference that environment. There is a theory called creating, or not even theory, there's a practice called creating a mood board. Let me save now. Now, autosave popped up, but this is not actually saved, so it won't save. Let me Control S. I'll save this just as a new map, that's fine. Where you create a mood board which has the elements of what your final look is going to be. Mood boarding is one of the things that we do in games development in order to create kind of a look that's consistent all the way across the board. And then you can create stuff from there. If your map has to be super precise, focus on the composition of whatever your reference is supposed to be. Since I don't have a reference image and I'm not going to do a mood board, this is going to be off the cuff. Okay, let's zoom out. And let's zoom out a lot here. And I apologize for how small the screen is. Normally I would try to get something a little bit better. There we go, that'll be fine. Let's try to make as big as possible our brush. Okay. And now that I have the noise selected, I'm just going to touch. Holding down left click. I'm still holding down the same left click. Just going to touch. Just touch. Still holding down the same left click. Just kind of applying some stuff. See some forms already happening. Some areas that I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. Just going to touch. Alright. That's the first touch, and we're just going to go ahead and have a look. I'm going to hit play, see what I've made. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. As you can see, the noise does create a significant amount of distortion and a significant amount of problems. All of these things we will fix when we actually get a chance to smooth things out. Now, we don't want to reapply this too much, but we can apply a few layers of noise. We just want a little bit of noise. Don't over-apply it to start to build out stuff like this. That's too much. If you're building out if you're starting to see things like mountains and things, you're adding too much noise. Oh, Control Y. Sorry. There we go. See, if you're starting to build things up, you're adding too much noise. We want to be able to just add noise to certain areas and just kind of go with that. There we go. Just a little bit of noise. We want a little bit of visual interest in places like that. Maybe some visual interest over here. We don't want to spend too much time adding too much noise because a lot of this detail will go away. A lot of this detail is just so that we can start building out some of these forms and get something that looks like it's an inconsistent ground. Looks like there's some stuff over there that I want to kind of fix. Let's touch this area right here. Okay. Touch that area right there. And you see how it creates kind of those weird divots. We'll fix that here shortly. Okay, let's assess. Okay, there's some areas that I do want to start building out. I see some areas that look pretty good over here. Now, once you've applied some general noise to everything, it is safe to start looking at places like this and try to use the noise tool to just kind of build them up. Not too much. If they start getting too aggressive, you can always Control Z and back them off. But building out areas like this will start kind of creating the random noise and elements that you like to see in like certain environments. I like that this is building up okay. Let's build this area up here a little bit more. Just touch it. It might get a little bit too, it's getting a little too aggressive over here. Let's see if I can bring that up a little bit and try to solve some of those issues. If not, I can always sculpt it back down. No big deal. There we go. Alright, we're getting some nice forms over there. Let's go ahead and build up this form over here. Again, can I go in here and hit play? Get a look to see what's going on. Okay, that looks fine. Let's take a look. Let's get a good look around. Okay, the area back there could use a little bit more visual interest. Let's go ahead and just kind of start massaging some things to see. Again, I'm just painting in some noise. Oh. Just kind of creating some visual interest. Some stuff that looks pretty okay. Build up this area over here in the corner. And again, this area is relatively small, but I think this will be okay for now. Let's hit play. Let's have a good look to see what this area looks like. Oh, I hit F8 while we were running. Sorry. Okay. So escape. I think that's going to be okay. There are some areas that look a little bland, like this area over here. I'm just going to add a little bit more noise over there. And again, we'll be able to sculpt this stuff out and kind of change some of it as we see fit. But I think this will be okay for now. This will just kind of be baby's first environment. I think that'll be fine. Alright, so we've got some noise. We've created some slopes. I think so far that's going to be okay to get us started. Let's now go ahead and actually start solving some of these problems that we're having with the environment. Let's go to our smooth tool and make sure that our smoothness is relatively small. I'm not going to change too much in here. I'm just going to make sure that we actually have a fairly large brush, and I am going to go ahead and zoom out, and I'm just going to touch some of the areas that are starting to get really, really ugly. I'm just kind of going to touch some of these areas. This area is getting kind of ugly. Just touch. This area is kind of ugly. Left click, just touch. You can always add more strength if it's not good enough. But essentially what I'm doing here is I'm trying to massage out some of these issues that I have. You can always add a little bit more strength. If you're adding too much strength, you're going to over smooth. So don't add too much strength. There we go. A little more power. Just kind of smoothing out some of these elements that look ugly, like that area right there. Just going to touch it a few times. I do like some of that stuff because it adds a little bit of kind of random erosion. I'm just going to touch. Try to smooth out some of those kind of graphical issues. It's going to give me something I think looks good. Smooth everything out. Just apply a general smooth everything. The area down there should probably be smooth a little bit harder. Just smoothing out. Giving everything a kind of a general touch of smoothness, but also focusing on some areas that have problems. Like that's a problem area right there. Gently, gently, gently. It's like the Bob Ross painting hour here. Solve that issue right there. There are no mistakes. There are just happy accidents. Let's go ahead. Is that there? Okay, alright. So I've smoothed out a few of the issues here. We've got some lighting issues here. So again, just some touches. A few clicks here and there. Let's have a look. Everything looks okay to me. We've smoothed out a lot of these issues, but we've lost some of our nice chiseled geometry. Let's just touch that a little bit down there and get rid of some of that. Yeah, it looks fine. And okay, it looks like we have some of the stuff that we kind of want to play. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Relatively small environment, but you know what? This is okay for what we need. Okay, let's take them over here. Oh, let's actually do a play from camera perspective. Camera location, we'll play. Oh, let's actually be above the ground. Okay. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. All right. Just to show everybody that error again, I just saved, or rather the autosave kicked in. And as you can see, there's a bunch of visual errors that are happening on the ground. All we need to do is kind of refresh the camera and it'll be fine. It'll go away. All right. So the smooth is going to solve a lot of our weird kind of graphical issues, but will also overly smooth certain areas. That's okay. It looks like we just kind of have this generic lumpy mess. And that's okay, right? Now, I'm not expecting you guys to be good sculptors or anything. This is why we're walking through this, so you guys can understand this. You don't necessarily need talent to make this. Anything that you're willing to practice, you can do. So as long as you're kind of following along and kind of sticking to me, I'm not going to use like weird kind of tools here. I'm just going to make Baby's first landscape so that everybody has something to work with, and we can continue forward from there. All right? All right. Step 3 is sculpting. So at this point, we've already applied some noise. That's step 1. Step 2 is apply some smoothness to solve some of these issues. Step 3 is sculpting. Now go ahead and raise your sculpting power something a little bit higher if you feel inclined to, like maybe a 0.8. And then go ahead and, change your brush size as you see fit, and then change your, add a little bit of change to your brush tip. And if you have any kind of desires to mess around with your brush type, your brush fall off, this would be a good idea to kind of do this now, because you have access right now, so this is fine. We need to find the areas that have the greatest interest of our level and start to sculpt out some of these details. So this is where we start building up some of our bigger and more aggressive forms. Like this form over here, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to build that up. I'm just going to add some build up to it. I'm using my mouse right now, so I'm going to try to solve some of these issues. And while holding down Shift, I'm also going to push some areas down and just really start to carve into the areas that I think look good and try to build something up that I think looks a little bit more awesome. So let's build that down. Let's build this back up a little bit. Shove that down. You can always add a little bit more power if we feel like we need it. Shove it down, bring that back up. Let's shove down this particular area right here. And all I'm doing right now is just kind of using the sculpt tool to kind of help me build out some of these chiseled forms and really just kind of set up something that I think looks good. Let's push this down a little bit. Build this up a little bit here. You don't have to spend too much time. Just start to think about how you want these forms to look. Push things down. Pull them back up if they look ugly. If things look really bad, go back to smooth. Smooth it out. And then go back to the sculpt and resculpt. There we go. It's looking a lot nicer. Let's show that down. Let's change the brush size a little bit. Show that down. There we go. We're getting some nice, relatively nice build-up forms here. Change the size of this. Just start to pump up this area over here. We can always use the clay brush as well. Remember, that kind of increases and fills gaps and whatnot, so see what kind of effect that's going to have. So you can see how that has more of a clay buildup effect. Personally, I'm going to just kind of stick with what I know here. Create some areas back here. We don't want the player to go back here. Now again, we still would need to add things like static meshes and whatnot to get this to work, but let's just focus on what we have. Again, building up some of these larger forms, squashing down things that don't look good, just building them up. You can be as aggressive or as, you know, as kind to the environment as you want. So that's getting a little bit too pointy, so we can pull that back down and build up this entire area here. Just kind of slowly build it up. There we go. I like this kind of crevasse over here, so I'm really going to chisel this area down. Kind of build that out. Yeah. Build that out. Get some lighting in there. Now, we don't have to worry about simulating erosion just yet. We will here in a sec. Let's kind of shove this into itself. Give a nice, like, kind of chiseled look here. Shove that down, but build this up here a little bit. Now, this is kind of generic. These mountains are relatively small in terms of like what mountains are supposed to be. You know how mountains are enormous. We're just kind of building up an area that we can kind of, like, these are just kind of some hills. They're not necessarily mountains per se, because obviously actual mountains would be a lot more difficult to traverse. But you can see kind of the overall logic is still being built out, right? This is very similar to the desert scene. It's very similar to the other scene that I showed you guys, a little lakeside scene. And that is just really just like half of this. So I'm just going to build some things out here for another minute or two, and then I'm just going to leave it alone and just be happy with what this is. Again, just kind of reinforcing some stuff and some forms that I have already. Let's see if there's anything that I like. I really do like this area over here, so I'm just going to chisel that out some more. Nice hill over here, so we can chisel that down. Got a nice little path over here. Chisel this in, pull that up, push it back down. We probably overdid that, so let's smooth this out a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Let's go back to Sculpt Tool, holding down Shift, shoving this area in a little bit. Shove this area down a little bit. There we go. Alright. Shove that area down. Just kind of pushing from both sides will give you like harder pinches. Pushing from both sides. This side. And then pushing from this side. Nice hard pinch. That's nice. Let's build this form a little bit. Got a little bit too sloppy in there. Like this. Let's shove this in. Shove that in. Oh, a little bit too aggressive. Control Z. Let's pull that out a little bit. There we go. Push this in. There we go. Let's focus on this area here real quick. Let's create some like chisels over here. A little too much. This is more like the inflate function inside of ZBrush, so if you're the kind of person that likes to use inflate, I used to always say inflat because the E always got cut off because my monitor was too small. Yeah, this looks okay. Chisel this area in right here. Bring that up. Just get those interesting forms looking okay. I like to modulate shadows a lot, so whenever I'm sculpting something, I'm going to see if the shadow gets affected. If the shadow is affected, then that's going to let you like create something very, very interesting and very cool. Very cool, very legal. Let's push this in from this side. Push that in. Build this out a little more. There we go. Oh, a little too aggressive. Bring that back down. Okay. It's looking okay. Alright, so we've got something I can work with here. I think I'm going to be happy with this for now. There's some areas that need, obviously, some additional work. Like this probably should be smushed down a little bit, but I'll try to erode that down and see if we get something we can work with. But generally speaking, let's have a look. Everything looks okay, as far as I can tell. Yeah, I like that. Alright, that's pretty good. Let's spend another minute kind of solving some issues here. I'm going to make my brush relatively small. And we'll start to really focus on some areas here, like kind of bringing out some specific pieces and whatnot. Changing your brush size and affecting the way that you're going to paint on the world. This is kind of the secret to good sculpting of environments. Let's push this in. Push this out a little bit. There we go. Let's create some chisels. Let's add a little more strength. There we go. There we go. That's, now we're cooking. Let's bring this area up a little bit. There we go. Let's start really getting some of those chisel details in. So basically, you just want to focus on shapes that you think look cool and just kind of build out what you want. I'll probably split this into 2 classes so that you guys get some land mass next week, so I'm not throwing everything in this particular demo for today. Let's go ahead and sculpt this out here. There we go. Looks pretty good. Holding down Shift to kind of push down these areas. Holding down left click to kind of build up some areas here. Yeah, there we go. And you can see how it's easy to spend a lot of time in places like this. Just start really kind of refining and creating your larger forms and your smaller forms. Go into detail lighting here. Get a better look at what's happening. Yeah, there we go. Let's do this. Let's build up some of these forms over here. There we go. Let's build this up over here. Following the natural contours of what we've already created. Just kind of building this stuff up. It's looking okay. And if it gets weird, you can always smooth, push it back down. It's totally fine. Just have fun with it, guys. This is part of the motif, is being able to build things out, just kind of having fun with it. Artists will probably like this a lot more. Programmers, you're probably gonna be like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is lame. You know what? You're lame. No, it's fine. This is kind of a necessary evil, especially if you're trying to build something out, right? All right. Next thing that we want to do is we want to actually add some erosion. Now, I typically add some regular thermal erosion, and then I'm going to set things up here. So I'm going to set my strength up to like 0.15 or like a 0.2. I'm going to increase my threshold. Now remember, threshold is what is going to increase the minimum height needed. I want to preserve those heights, so I want to set this up a little bit higher, maybe to like 128 is fine. I'll probably set it to 125, just not get maxed it out. Surface thickness I'm not going to mess with. I'm going to turn my iterations down a little bit smaller. Remember, more means more erosion. I want fewer iterations, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to like 19. And then I'm going to start by increasing the size of my brush, tooling up my fall off a little bit, and then I'm going to try to touch this area and see what it's going to do here. There we go. There we go. We're getting some sick looking erosion there. Look at that. See? This is why it looked donkeys when we were actually playing around with it and I was showing you tools. By adding, look at how that erosion reacts to some of those areas that I've raised up. Look at that erosion right there. That's real nice. So push that over there. Just kind of push this area in over here. Again, kind of sculpting that erosion to get that really sick looking stuff. We can always re-smooth again. We're going to need to, obviously. Just kind of chisel those areas in. Yeah, look at that. That's what I like to see. This area is kind of ugly down here, so let's go ahead and see if we can sculpt out some of that. Yes, that's what I like to see. Alright. I got a lot of shadow over there, no big deal. I can always rotate my light to have a look. Where's my light? Light source. There we go. Back in the tool. Still in the erosion. Yes, look at that. That's right. There we go. Look at that. You guys are sculpting real mountains now. Look at that. That looks sick. Getting all that light. Now getting a lot of pollution over here, a lot of ugliness. That's okay. You can fix that. Go back to the sculpt tool. Change the size of this. Sculpted this area here. Areas that are sculpted up like this will have really, really hard erosion. So let's go ahead and like kind of build some intentional erosion right there. Let's go back to the erosion tool. Increase the size of our brush and just kind of chisel it back in. Ignore that. It's just letting me know that I'm running out of time. I've got about another...
There are some reminders for Rodney.
Sorry about that, folks. I've got about another 30, 35 minutes left before I have to kind of wrap this up for this session. Mostly because it takes a lot of time to kind of get all this stuff kind of put together. So feel free to sculpt out some erosion here and kind of get these forms that look good. Real environments don't have soft lumpiness. Real outdoor environments have something that look more like this. So make sure that if you're chiseling things out, that it makes sense for what you're doing, and try to reproduce something that you know from your head. I do a lot of hiking. And areas like this are generally rolling grasslands, but rocks have a very distinctive look. Areas that have a very distinctive cusp like this generally have areas that look like this as well. Look at that. Gotta get your lights and your darks. Gotta have the good and the bad, right? That's how it works, right? You gotta have your opposites. You have to have your hard forms and your soft forms. You have to have your lights and your darks. Look at that. The more chiseling you do, the better this looks. You can spend a lot of time doing this kind of stuff. This is a lot of fun, especially because I'm mostly a technical artist. I end up having to make some art sometimes. So when you have to make some art sometimes, being able to just sit down and make something cool like this, it's actually kind of fun. Alright. Gotta have highs and lows, bigs and smalls, soft and hard, soft chisels, hard chisels. We can fix some of that later. We can fix that up and give that a little touch here. We'll smooth that out a little bit. Gotta have a little sadness so you can have a little bit of happiness. Just like in real life, right? Just so you know when the good times come. I'm waiting on those good times now. Alright, that'll be okay. Chisel that in. Alright, a little touch over here. Yeah, I like that. That looks real nice. That erosion looks super sick on this one. I spent a lot of time on this one. This looks donkeys. Let's fix that a little bit. Let's add a little bit of sculpting here. Let's connect these two areas. Just gonna build up this area here. So that, there we go. That's a little bit more realistic. Let's go ahead and go back to erosion. There we go. Yeah, that's what I like. So obviously there's some little lumpies that I'd probably want to fix like this. But this is starting to take some form. Let's go ahead and go back to regular lit mode. So you can see there's a lot that we've kind of created. We have this little area down here. Obviously we're floating a little bit now, but we can always fix our center point, or we can move the landscape. It just depends. But this is pretty straightforward. Let me save my work. Now the bug is back, so let's look around. There we go. Just something that happens when you're working in Unreal. Let's go back into the detail lighting. That's going to show us some stuff. And I'm going to go back to my smooth tool, and I'm going to very lightly turn that down. I'm going to start smoothing out some of these. Not too much. It's a little too much smoothing, so like 0.15. Let's see. A little too much. 0.02. Oh, that's a little, no, sorry, 0.02. There we go. There we go. Start to touch areas like this. Those areas will just kind of get repaired. Now remember, your virtual shadow maps are going to behave weirdly in Lumen. So if you see areas like that that are like really offensive, just give them a little touch. We don't want to lose a lot of this detail, but we do want to smooth out some of the stuff that we don't want. Like that erosion down there that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, smooth that out. This erosion right here doesn't make any sense. Just give it a few touches of the softness. Just hit it with the smooth. Yeah, that's alright. That's fine. This area up here? Yep, hit it with some smooth. This area down here? Yep, hit it with a little smooth. Like that song by Rob Thomas, Smooth. Always smoothing. Solving some of these issues that you're creating. Again, a lot of the noise happens because, well, we started with noise. So, of course, we're going to have some issues that we solve here. Let's solve some of that ugliness right there. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, let's have a little look here. A little touch right there. Have a look. A little touch right there. Just smooth out those forms. Let's see if I want to turn down the filter kernel radius to like maybe a 3 to preserve some of my larger forms. Let's make sure that's the correct thing then. Yeah, I want to smooth out smaller details. There we go. That's right. Okay. Ooh, that's nice. Alright, let's just fix this area over here. Yeah, just give everything a nice little quick touch. Very soft, light touch. That's what we want. That's what plants crave, right? Okay, we'll do that. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. There's a little area over there I think looks ugly. Let's just give it a quick touch. Maybe a little retopo. Retopologize. Let's go back to our lit mode. Let's touch this a little bit. It's almost like a smooth, but not super aggressive. Shrink this down a little bit. Touch it a little more. It's kind of fixing our problems. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Now, some of this stuff is not going to go away like this. We either want to smooth that until it goes away, or we want to texture this so that this stuff kind of disappears. Alright. I think that's good for now. Okay. Let's add some more erosion here. Just some hydro erosion. Now, that was just dry erosion. That was just thermal erosion. Let's go ahead and add some dry lads here. Let's just raise the power to 0.1. And we'll do the same thing. We'll leave this at like, we'll leave that at default. Let's go ahead and change our iterations. We'll set this down to like 25. I think that's fine. We'll do rain to the entire area. I personally like setting that. And we'll set our distribution scale to be larger so we get larger chunks of rain. I think that'll be okay. I like using 125 for a lot here, so. Cha-cha real smooth. Leave that alone. Let's raise the power. I'm not going to mess with the fall off. Let's go ahead and turn on the detail lighting again. Get a look. Let's see what it's going to do here. That's aggressive. Okay, we'll back that off a little bit. Oh, Control Y, want to redo the retopologize. We want to have some hydraulic erosion, but I think I'm just going to touch certain areas just to create some more stuff. Up, that looks real ugly over there. Gotta be real careful touching certain edges. We just want to touch some things. We don't want to get too crazy with the hydraulic erosion because hydraulic erosion is incredibly destructive. We just want to touch some areas to allow the engine to create those natural divots that you would just get if you were just... Oh, a little too aggressive there. Just a quick touch. There we go. Just a little touch. So, there we go. That's nice. Always thinking about going back. Touching the hydro and then touching it with a little bit of smoothness. Again, light touches, light touches. If you're on a Wacom tablet, you're basically walking on water right now because I'm having to use a full click. Liquid erosion is nice. Look at that. That's right. A bit of liquid erosion over there. Yes. Well, that's a little too deep right there. Let's go back to Sculpt Tool. Let's just kind of massage that out. Oh, a little too much massaging. Let's go ahead and make that a little smaller and just kind of massage out this little area right there. Again, gotta make sure that the shadow looks good. Let's get the regular erosion here and just touch this area here. And I'll go back to the hydro erosion and just kind of see if we can improve it. There we go. That looks a little better. Oh, a little ugly right there. We don't want too much stretching. Smooth this bad boy out. There we go. Alright, a little more hydro erosion, probably in this particular area over here. A little more regular erosion. Well, actually, I smoothed that out a little too much. Regular erosion is going to be fine. There we go. Does everybody see how we're getting some really cool looking forms now? And how you can spend a lot of time doing this stuff? You can spend a significant amount of time doing this, but there comes a time for quitting. See, I don't like that down there, so we can sculpt a Y here. I'm going to sculpt something like a Y section here. Make that relatively small, and I'm just going to hold down Shift, and we're just going to tool strength up. Just going to sculpt kind of like a Y section here, and then we're going to get some erosion. Oh, I'm changing the size of the grid here. That's what happens. Sometimes you have to click, and then that'll work. Let's go ahead and touch that a little bit. A little too much erosion. There we go. That's a little bit more natural looking. Okay. A little more hydro erosion in certain areas over here. That's fine. There we go. It's a little too much. A little touch. A little too much power. A little bigger. Couple clicks. Couple clicks. Couple clicks. And I think that's going to do it for this. Alright, sorry about that. I had to take a phone call. As you can see, I saved and everything got weird. So, whoop. Alright, I think that's going to be okay. Let's make a test material that we can actually put on here and see if we're having any stretching. So what I like to do is I like to make a material. I don't know if this actually exists in the I'm trying to think if it does exist in the let's go ahead and go back out here. I'm trying to see if I have a material that exists. Let's save all in here. It's fine. That I can steal from the engine content. Let's go ahead and turn on the engine content and see if I can actually work with it. If I'm just going to have to make something, because I know you know what? Let's just make it. Go to materials. We're gonna make a new material here. I think that's gonna be the best thing. I'll make a new material, and we're gonna call this M stretch test, and we're going to open this up, and I'm just going to make a quick and dirty material that is going to be useful for me to kind of work with. We're to parameter, and this will be color 1. We'll do a duplicate of this, rename this color 2. We'll just set this one to white. And we'll do linear interpolate with a lerp. L left click is what I'm using there. And to B, let's control this with a texture object. Okay, since we are using the engine content, so that is on, which means that it's going to be able to find this. So let me see if I can find a grid. Yeah, I'm going to find just the default white grid, and we're going to align this properly. Now, you guys probably don't know how to do this. This is totally fine. I'm going to make a 3 constant here. I'm going to put 100. 100, I'm just using it for math, times 100, do that, it's fine. We'll do a world aligned texture. This is probably a little bit more advanced than most of you are used to, which is fine, that's okay. We'll do texture size v3 there. Do I have a normal version of that? Texture object duplicate. Yes, I do. We'll grab this, duplicate that. We'll do the same thing. We'll grab our texture object, put that in there. Put this over here in the texture size. I'm going to put a constant in here. Actually, I'm going to put a 1 constant, 1 left click, just like we talked about a few weeks ago. Roughness on this is like 0.25. 0.65. That'll be fine. Plug this in normal. Looks pretty good. And then I missed something. Oh, wait. Let's start previewing that node. Not exactly what I want, but let's see what this final result looks like. Let me check my math here. I think this is okay. Just kind of a test texture that we can use. Let's save that. Cool. Stretch test should be updating. Come on, why are you not updating? This can be a bug sometimes where this doesn't update even in the viewport. There it goes. Create a material instance, just like we talked about when we were doing the grass stuff. Material instance, but we have a master material right there. Home. Material instance stretch test. Put this on the ground. Actually, in order to put this on the ground, we need to go to our landscape. Our landscape itself does have a place where we can slide a texture, but I'm going to tell you right now, a landscape is different from a landscape material. I'll show you guys how to make one because that's going to be important in the future. Let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and grab the, I'll grab my material instance stretch test, and this should compile. And let's go ahead and open up material instance here. And let's go ahead and change the color to like a ground color. I think that's going to be helpful. Like a mud brown. It's a little hard to do this on the virtual machine. Let's open up the parent. Let's see if I can modify the size here. 50 by 50 by 50. Let's apply. Oh, no, we need to go bigger. Throw another 0 in there. You don't need to do this, guys. Just, I'm doing this to test for stretching. There we go. That's going to be more obvious now. Let's play. Shaders are compiling, so the GI is going to be weird. There we go. Now GI can compile. Okay, it looks like we do have some stretching issues in some places. That's okay. In areas like that, we can go ahead and go back to the landscape tool. I'm going to go into the retopology. There it is, retopo. And I'm just going to kind of touch some of these areas to see if that solves some of those issues. That was okay. That solved that a little bit. It's not too bad over here. Some issues over here. That went away. Little touches. You don't need to slave away to figure out if everything is working. Some retopology over there. Get some ghosting over there. That's fine. Let's solve that issue. That's okay. And that looks okay here. A little bit of stretching over here. A little touch right there should fix that. A little bit of weirdness over there. A little touch will fix that. A lot of weirdness over here. Let's go ahead and touch that a little bit more aggressively. Keep touching it. Okay. Probably needs a little dab smooth. Cha-cha real smooth. Alright, that's good. Play. Alright, that looks good. Alright, well, let's doll this up to have this look pretty decent so we can see what the heck is going on. I'm going to go ahead and default player start. We're going to start from right here. Come on, don't crash, please. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and set up our light to look decent. For my directional light, always start the character in a different location as well. Okay. Make sure I'm on time here. Alright, so we talked about sculpting. Kind of playing around with materials here. I've talked about the tools. Let me see here. I'm going to save foliage, and I'm going to save land mass for, I think, next week. So let's talk a little bit about the sky dome and some of the lighting and volumetric clouds, and I'll add a few things. So let's go ahead and talk about kind of how to doll this up. So we have this environment inside of this lovely sky sphere here, and of course we learned about the sky sphere during lighting. If we go ahead and refresh the material should at least adhere to the location of our sun. Let's go ahead and find our light again, sorry. And we can see that the location of the sun does adhere to the location of the sky. But typically speaking, if you guys are going to be working in Unreal Engine 5, at least the majority of you are, you're going to want to focus a lot of your efforts on kind of understanding some of the newer systems. So the sky dome we talked about in the past, if we go ahead and set that underneath the ground, the lower we set it, when we reset the sky, we get a slightly different sky, so on and so forth, right? Oh, everybody sees the saving bug, so we have to look around real quick. But let's go ahead and talk about some elements that we can add in the scene to kind of improve our outdoor look. I'm going to go ahead and grab my sky sphere. And I'm going to, before I do anything, I'm going to save all. Neat. Okay. Let's go ahead and delete the sky sphere. Now we can always get it back. We can just make a new one. It's fine. In fact, I'll show you how to do that. Deleting the sky sphere basically deletes a lot of the, not the sky per se, but it deletes a lot of what we can see visually because it itself is a static mesh. If we go into the engine content, oh, it's actually called BP. There it is. It's called BP Sky _ sphere. If you drag this back into the scene, it basically comes back. The only thing that you have to do at this point is reselect the directional light, and then it's back. That's it. That's how you would repair the sky sphere. But we don't want the sky sphere right now. Remember, that's located inside of the engine content. You have to actually show the engine content before you can use it. This can be dangerous, so just be careful with it. Let's go ahead and select our BP sky sphere, and let's go ahead and delete it. We want to start thinking about how lighting is going to affect our geometry and how it's going to affect how everything looks in this particular scene. Now, because we're not going to talk about landmass today, we will probably close this out with the discussion on displacement before we move on. So let's go ahead and talk very quickly about how to create kind of like a better sky per se. Let's go ahead and place an actor, and we can go ahead and grab the sky atmosphere here. I'm going to drag this into the scene. So the sky atmosphere, funnily enough, does have the ability to affect the way that the environment looks. Now, as you can see, there's some blackness right there. That has to do with our environment height. We might be able to fix that, or we can just bring up our height to be able to hide those elements. That might be the simplest solution, or we could bring this up entirely to kind of be up a little bit higher in the atmosphere. But let's see if we can get this solved real quick. Select your directional light and make sure that the atmosphere sunlight option is available. The atmosphere sunlight is going to allow you to control whether or not you can cast some lighting from the directional light into the sky. And in fact, hitting the hotkey should work by default if everything is set up correctly. I'm going to hit Control L, and I'm holding on. Let me hit Control L, and I'm going to hold on to Control L. I think if you also hold down, if you hold down Control, holding down Control L will allow you to manipulate the sky. As you can see, I can very easily, just like I showed you guys in a previous demo and with the Sun Temple, we can still change the way that this light is focused on in this particular scene. So we can go ahead and put the light wherever we want. If we don't like the way that the light looks, we can again, wherever we are, hit Control L and try to manipulate the direction of our light. So that's pretty straightforward as far as creating light. The other thing that you can do with the skylight is you can actually do what's called a real-time capture. Real-time capture is useful for if you have a real-time atmosphere, and in fact is only ever useful if you have a real-time atmosphere. Otherwise, you want to be able to use a cube map. One of the two. You can't use both the effects. We won't talk about this too much because this is intermediate stuff. This is advanced lighting. Let's go ahead and also add some clouds because, again, like I showed you guys previously, the clouds do contribute to the atmosphere. Let's bring in our volumetric clouds. Okay, that's looking pretty okay. Let's go ahead and look at our clouds here. Let's double check to make sure that we can actually see. Let's manipulate the layer bottom altitude and make it a fairly high day, so we can just raise the height a little bit. Let's go back to the default. There we go. Those clouds high in the air. I don't want to mess with my tracing start max distance. This controls how far the sky can go. This is also generally a fix for some of the landscape issues, but as you can see, the trace gets a little bit weird once you go too far. So we just want to do something like that and then maybe fix the, change the planet radius here. Actually, we'll leave this by default. This assumes that the planet radius has a very specific amount of distance for the Rayleigh scattering. And our ground albedo we can just pin from our color here. Oops. Let's go back to the volumetric cloud here. Let's bring this up. Okay, that's the correct ground albedo, so that's pretty close. All right, so we've added some things that we can use to kind of improve the cloud rendering. There's not too many options in there that we can work on. Let's also go ahead and grab the sky atmosphere. Let's see. Don't think I want to affect this too much, because that's not going to affect the light. I'm rotating to see if I can get some better results from the sky, but I think this is fine. We're basing it on the position of the light anyways, so I think that'll be okay. Let's grab our volumetric clouds here. Move it up a little bit so I can see it. There we go. If your items are getting too small for you to like really work with them, you can always increase their size by going into the billboard size and just pumping them up. I like to pump up the billboard size of elements. The billboard is the size of the object that we can see, and that's how you would modify that. It's underneath rendering. I think that's all the way at the bottom. Let's see, there it is. Billboard size right there. Okay, I think that's looking okay. So now that we're doing real-time capture, we can actually visualize our lumen scene and get an idea of what is actually happening in this particular scene. So if we go ahead and go into, let's actually add more light to this particular scene. I'm going to add maybe 14 lumens. And this is kind of like a super sunny afternoon, right? That's not even technically accurate. Let's back that up a little bit so we can kind of not have to stare at the sun. And that's looking a little bit better. We're getting some of the scattering. We're getting some of our clouds. Let's go ahead and go back into our, let's see, what do I want to mess with here? Let's go to the world outline. This is going to make my life a little bit easier. Let's see. Let's grab our skylight here. I don't want to mess too much in here. Do we actually have a fog in here yet? Nope. Let's go ahead and place one. I'm going to grab an exponential height fog, and I'm just going to bring it into the scene. And the thing next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on a setting that I actually like setting a lot. We'll go into project settings, and I'm going to look for a setting called fog. There we go. Shader permutation reduction. I'm going to go ahead, and you guys don't have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and support sky atmosphere affecting height fog. The sky atmosphere component can light up the height fog, but it requires an extra sampler's textures to be bound to apply aerial perspective on transparent surfaces and all surfaces on mobile via per vertex evaluation. It requires our support atmosphere to be true. We're going to set this to true. It's going to want to restart. Let me make sure to save everything before I restart. And I'll be back when this restarts. Now it needs to recompile all my shaders, so we need to wait for this to happen. After this, I think what I'm going to do is I'm also going to go ahead and do displacement very quickly, just to showcase what displacement does, and then I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Alright, about 5 minutes later, and once we're almost ready, let's just go ahead and watch it compile so that we know that I'm not a liar. Actually, it's more like 3 minutes, come to think of it. Oh, it wasn't too bad. Oh my gosh, it has to recompile all our shaders. Oh boy, this might be a mess. Oh wait, maybe it doesn't need to. Oh, yes it does. Darn. I'll cancel this. We'll go ahead and open up the other project. Should be my second map. Alright, that's going to take a bit to compile, so that the shaders on that map will compile. So while I'm waiting, let me actually go ahead and do something else. I will showcase another element in the scene. I will showcase something else as far as maps will go while this is compiling, and then I might be able to get this done in time. We'll see. All of our lighting is still in the scene, it looks like. We still have our clouds. Wait, no, this is our other scene. Oh, doesn't need map. There we go. Okay. So everything is still in here. That's fine. It's going to take a bit to compile, so while I'm waiting, I'm going to go ahead and do a new level, and I'll talk about something else while we wait. Control save current as. Okay. On my desktop, I actually already have an image that I have saved from another file. If you are in a program that generates height maps, this is going to be what you want to kind of look at. Let's see if we can open this. This is what's called a height map. Areas that are listed in white are going to be closer to us, and we've seen this before with the grass material during, I think it was week 2 or 3, or no, week 3, 4, excuse me. And areas that are further away from us are going to be pushed away. Now, because of the overall resolution and the overall size of these particular maps, let's look at the details. These maps can absolutely affect the way that our geometry looks inside of the Unreal Engine. Let's go ahead and go back into our scene here. And I'm going to go ahead and move this down a little bit so we can actually get something placed. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import from file, and I'm going to find that height map. Desktop, 16-bit height map. We're going to open this up. And as you can see, let me just back that up. That height map is attempting to load. Now we can go ahead and fit this to the data, and by default the data is already fit when we are importing from a material. But if you need to make any changes, this will be where you do it. I'm trying to stretch this area out here. There we go. So you can see kind of how our height map influence is working already. We can increase the scale. So for example, 1000. And that lowers our overall size. Let's go ahead and reset that. So you see kind of how the map is affected by our ability to scale it out. Now, what it's trying to do is it's trying to scale out our data. If we hit fit to data again, let's reset this. We see that our data is attempting to figure out what sections that our height map are saved from. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up the landscape tools, and I'm going to try to get something as close as possible here. So it looks like it wants 127 by 127. Let's see. I'm looking at the chart that I showed earlier. This will work at a 160 or 163. Let's add a 2 by 2 section here. And let's take a look to make sure this componentry, it should give us about 289 components. It's looking at our vertice size. So our total components is 289. This is going to be closer to 4,000 by 4,000. Maybe it'll be easier to do one. Yeah, let's do that. Let's import and see what this looks like. And because that height map has so much density, we can see how it's affecting the overall world. Now, our landscape is actually a little bit lower than I'd like it to be, but that's fine. We can select the landscape and actually physically move it up. This is kind of a sketchy operation. Close enough. And we can see that our height map has brought in some awesome looking geometry. This kind of stuff is very difficult to achieve without a significant amount of work in the sculpting tool. Do you see kind of how the difference in this is much, much higher than, say, something that I built in like 40 minutes? That's kind of the big difference. Let's go ahead and grab our light source. And I'm going to just rotate it around so that we can see something. And this game is supposed to be kind of like a like a deathmatch game that happens right in the middle. The scale is relatively large. We see that the scale is pretty, not beastly, but large enough for it to be, you know, compelling as far as the overall size for maybe a Team Fortress style size map, or something big enough to allow us to kind of size up what we're going to be doing in this particular map. Let me actually look at something here. We don't have world partition on, so that's not going to work out. Let's see if I can get like a top-down view of something that looks convincing. So that's what our environment looks like. Let's do detail lighting. So this is what our environment looks like. We're smack dab in the center, and obviously we can see very clearly that this environment is actually loaded up. That's what the benefit of creating a height map in a program like Gaia, a world machine, can actually do. Because you can use the tools to automatically generate topology that works fairly well in this particular engine. If we go ahead and select our landscape in this particular case, and go ahead and apply our stretching tool, our stretching tester, we can see that the stretching is fairly minimal, and our overall result is this awesome looking kind of landscape that has a high amount of detail to it. This is kind of the overall strength of being able to use height maps versus just trying to sculpt this data, because you saw that I was able to create data that looks something like this, but the amount of time and accuracy and precision to produce stuff like this in like this particular area over here. Let's go ahead and look at the detail lighting. And let's go ahead and kick off that texture. Do you see how difficult something like an endeavor like this would be? So oftentimes, a lot of professionals will want to make height maps using a height map generating program, but you don't have to, at least for this class. Your environments are just going to be fine without being able to use a height map, and in fact, you can get away with a whole lot with just standard sculpting. There's nothing special about being able to use height maps, except that height maps give you a lot of information and a lot of geometry that you can use in order to create a much, much wider game, or a much, much bigger game in terms of like overall scale. And we can actually increase the scale here. Come on. To make our area appear even larger. Now, that creates some efficiency problems, but you can create a small, because now we're going to get texture stretching, we're going to get some issues. But if we up the scale of these, takes a sec for it to load. This landscape is getting very, very large. We're not adding more components, we're simply just scaling out what we already have. Will probably fall through the world because, actually, no, it's right here. Nice. But we see how it's moved in the world space. We're no longer at the center point. But changing the scale of these things is how we can create a very, very large environment using a map that doesn't necessarily perform worse than using something, well, let's do this, 200 and 200. Yeah, that worked out. And let's find our center point here. Let's go ahead and move our... Uh-oh, I might have crashed it. We're not moving enough in numbers. Uh-oh. Okay, let's not do that. think we're moving too far off. Yeah. Keep adding zeros until we actually get to the location that we want. Now these numbers are getting kind of big and a little scary, but there's too many zeros. Okay. We can go ahead and affect this number here. Close enough. And then because these mountains are a little bit smaller, we can scale this up again. Let's go to 250. And now we have something even bigger. This is going to take a while for us to fall. If you're feeling vertigo, look away. Because I tend to get really kind of weirdly vertigoed when I'm working on a game that's doing incredibly large scale. Boom. That is more akin to like a normal size, but if we go ahead and look at our landscape size, our landscape components are still just kind of the standard size. See? This is not super optimal because what happens is you lose, if you're scaling up, you lose some vertices and you might not be able to get the level of precision that you want from your level and also the level of culling that you might want to need if your level is supposed to run at a certain speed. But we won't worry about that too much. As we can see, our sections exist. We can go ahead and try to resize it from here. But all we've done is we've taken the default size and then doubled the scale. That does mess with some of the vertice position at the low end, but that's not going to affect our overall environment as a whole. So if you find that your environment is sculpted well enough and you have enough vertices to get away with kind of hiding the fact that your environment should probably be scaled up, this is where you want to mess with your scale of your environment. But generally speaking, unless you know what you're doing, do not touch these. Do not scale anything. Just use the default size. It will make your life a little bit easier. The only time you'd want to scale up an environment is if you, for whatever reason, are using a height map and you needed to get more scale from your additional map. We can see how much bigger this environment is now as a whole. Am I gonna? No, I don't want to fall again. Let's go ahead and current camera location. Let's play. So we can see how much larger this environment is in terms of raw scale. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and grab the character and see if I can make him faster. Let's go with third-person character. We'll go with third-person blueprints. We'll grab the character, and we're going to increase his walk speed to something disgusting. Now, it doesn't look like this is going to compile anytime soon. So I'm going to let this finish up compiling, and we'll talk about the lighting stuff a little bit more when dealing with lighting with an outdoor scene. But we'll do something with that next week. Let me go ahead and grab my character movement here. Let's add a couple of zeros to this. So now he's moving even faster, and you still see how long it takes for us to get to this area over here. Look at how much faster we're moving, and we're still taking forever to cross this environment. So again, this is just kind of a standard. It's a standard environment that was created in another program that has a very specific amount of distance. I think this is a few square miles. I forget what it is. Let me try to remember. I've got my notes here. Let me bring up my notes. All right, it's about 16K. So this is a fairly large map by default. And then what I've done is I scaled up this information to allow us to have an even bigger environment. And this is just kind of rude how big this is, right? Now landscape runs relatively well. As you can see, I'm still running at a pretty decent clip, even though I'm running really fast. Landscape is designed to be optimal because that's kind of how landscape works. But there are some things that you have to be aware of when you are working with landscape to be able to cull certain elements of the landscape. bear in mind that this is going to be different than using a system like World Partition. World Partition is the newest system in Unreal Engine 5, and we will cover that in the intermediate course. What World Partition does is it allows you to have a landscape that is still obscenely large, like this. This isn't necessarily super obscenely large, but this is getting fairly big as far as the landscape is concerned. Let's see if we can do something here. I'm going to zoom right out here. And as you can see, it takes forever for me to move anywhere. We can go ahead and move our camera speed here. Set up our camera speed to move even faster. Let's go into here. See if we can do something relatively cursed. I'm going to pause here for a moment to see if I don't crash this. So I did manage to crash it. I was trying to duplicate this to see how many I could get away with making before I absolutely had an issue. As you can see, this map itself has a few issues that I would be able to go back in and fix. For example, I'd probably want to go ahead and trim some of that off. Let's go ahead and go to Manage, if it'll even let me. See if we can select. So that's kind of an issue with the way that I exported the map. We probably wouldn't allow the character to come all the way out here because that's just kind of not a good idea. Same thing with this. It looks like my edges are getting trimmed off, so that's not too bad. I'd probably stretch the map out to allow the player to like not have to deal with that. Now, the other question is, can you use multiple landscapes? Yes, but it's not a good idea to use multiple landscapes to build an entire landmass together, right? And I don't mean landmass by like lightmass. Or even the landmass plugin. I mean, in order to, if I was going to build this out as a large persistent world, I would definitely want to do something other than creating just multiple landscapes. I would create probably a large landscape and then put everything into World Partition to allow me to use the landscape tool as optimized as physically possible. Landscape and World Partition don't play well together right now, so there is no workflow for that. But again, all of this was made to demonstrate one element, the ability to have a displacement map. Let me go ahead and actually delete this bad boy. And to delete a landscape is as simple as just going into the world outliner and selecting it and deleting it. And then we can go find our floor again. And I'm going to, whoa, too fast. Let's go ahead and set this back down to 4, which is our default camera speed. And it's going to still be too fast, but we can go ahead and just kind of move this around and just kind of use the mouse wheel to slow us down. Okay? And if it's still too fast, you can always go ahead and set the speed lower. It just depends on what you want to do. Okay. So let's go ahead and add one more height map. This isn't generated from another program that I used. This one was made partially by hand. Let me pause here for a moment. All right, I brought it in. Let's go ahead and bring it back in. Bring a new landscape in here. Cool. Let's go ahead and just select the old one. Import from file. I'm going to go ahead and select this one, and I'm going to grab just this kind of generic height map, and I'm going to automatically fit to data. And we're just going to go ahead and move it so that our landscape is kind of placed in the correct area. And let's go ahead and import. Cool. And then I'm going to increase the vertical scaling to kind of bring this up a little bit because that's kind of what works well for this particular map. I'm going to go ahead and go into the select tool. If your details panel doesn't come up, you might want to make sure that you are in the correct mesh editing mode. It's important to recognize which mode that you're in. A lot of students get caught up on that. And we'll set the scale to like 125, 150, 115. There we go. And we hit play. We're going to be moving really fast here, so I apologize. Let me actually move to someplace a little bit better. This is where the game is actually supposed to take place, right here. This is about the size of kind of a relatively small level that you get away with, especially if you had like a... We can always increase the size of the X and Y as well, so we can set like 150 by 150. And that's going to kill a lot of our vertical size, but that's why we set the z-axis a little bit higher to be able to increase the stretching of our environment. And this creates a pretty convincingly large environment that takes a second for us to go through. Now, I wouldn't, again, use the scaling tools. I would build the correctly sized map, but this map was intentionally created this way in order to keep the scale relatively normal. And as you can see, this environment is a little bit lumpier than our nice high-resolution one. This one was handmade. But this works just fine for a game as well. What you're going to end up doing a lot of is you're going to be improving the texture work so that you hide a lot of the lumpiness that's in here. This is actually pretty straightforward. And of course, you can always add things like, this is supposed to be kind of like an ocean dock area, so let me go ahead and increase the slider speed here. So you can see where it drops off into what is supposed to be water, but there's no water plane. But you get the idea. Something like this is pretty decent for making just about anything that you need in your environment. Again, height maps are not the be-all, end-all. They are useful to making environments, but they are not the only way to make environments. Next week, I'm going to show you guys the landmass toolkit, and then I'm going to show you guys how to make landscape materials, and then I'm going to show you guys how to make and apply foliage. Well, how to apply foliage, really. Making foliage is for an art class, really, but I'm going to show you kind of some preliminary things of what you can do, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up landscapes from there. Let me go ahead and move back now that my new map has finally finished compiling. Cool. Now the fog is getting contribution from the light, so we can do some fun tricks like this. Let's make sure that I've got, that's the volumetric clouds. Where's my exponential height fog? There it is, right there. We'll close this one, and we'll just go ahead and mess with this one. Bring that down. Bring this one down. And the nice thing is we get, does everybody see how it's kind of fixed the stuff in the distance? By adding a little bit of fog, and we can change the height fall off, and then change some of the, let's see if we can change the albedo somewhat. We're getting some contribution from the volumetrics in it. So it's not necessarily the best looking effect. We're getting some scattering effect from it. So let's see what else we can add. So I've been jumping around a little bit here, folks, but try to bear with me when I'm kind of running through some of the stuff that really should just be, we should definitely, you know, cover it. Right? It's going to be important as a whole. Select our sky atmosphere. We'll talk more about these different scatterings. I'm going to save this for next week, so we'll talk about that when we get there. It's fine. We'll go ahead and select the directional light. Go ahead and do that to bring some of that down. Let's go back into our atmospheric fog. Again, I'm just kind of showing some stuff that you can do with your atmosphere. And we can go ahead and see if we can turn on the volumetric component. And then let's see if we can add some volumetric lighting. Let's see if we can get 15, 25, 500. There we go, we're getting some lighting from it. Let's do 50. Getting some volumetrics from it, but that's fine. We can always add some more power to it. More of that. We'll go back to the fog. Let's see. I think it's going to be scattering distribution. We can go open these up. No, that's not what I want. Let's see. Let's do... Make sure I'm looking at the correct setting here. I want to make sure that I'm actually able to cut this off at the right place. So let's see here. You know, I think the default software is going to be fine. Let me go ahead and hit Control L and see if we can kind of illustrate some of the contribution that we can see. Let's make sure I can see where my directional light is here. Hit Control L. So the nice thing is because we have the fog set up to actually be able to reproduce those kinds of colors, that's the trick, right? We have the exponential height fog, and the nice thing about being able to set things like the interscattering color is that by turning these up, you can see how the light tries to obey whatever is happening, but by setting that up this way, we can affect the overall light in the overall heights that we have, which is actually kind of useful when it comes to making this particular kind of effect in the distance. And now that we have our sky scattering set up appropriately, we can always go back to our, oh, I missed it, sky atmosphere, and start messing with things like our Rayleigh scattering, which affects the overall tonage of our light. There to see kind of how overall effect. And you can get very, very kind of wild. But I'll talk about this a little bit more. This is Mie scattering. This is the kind of stuff that happens when light gets caught in the clouds. Rayleigh scattering is the overall color of the environment. Woo, it's the hypnotoad. But it's the overall color of this environment as the sun gets its own recast lighting. Let me go ahead and set that to green so we can see what is actually happening here. So what's happening is the light is a certain color up here, but the ground represents the opposite tone. If we go up here and see what happens. See? That's what Rayleigh scattering is. So depending on your time of day and what kind of mood you're trying to create, this is more like kind of like a dune color scene where we have a slightly soft pinkish or soft gray. The more green that we add to the sky, everybody see how the more pink it becomes. The more blue we add, the more yellow. The more yellow we add, the more blue. This is kind of how Rayleigh scattering works. And of course, the sky luminance, which just controls the color of the sky. Something a little bit less exciting. But that's kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about a little bit next week when we're talking about things like overall Mie, Rayleigh, and crepuscular rays. This is just kind of a foresight into how you can create some better looking environments using the tools that we have available. But we'll talk about that when we get there. I'll probably save that for the session at the end of the session next week. So I'm going to go ahead and save this for now. Oh, there's that bug again. It looks funnier when you actually have a texture. Yeah, there you go. That just means that everything is saving. It doesn't mean that anything is crashing. And as we can see, as we go too high up, we can see that the ground actually doesn't preserve our distance. But that's why you'd want to have things like a backdrop. As you can see, we have some volumetric lighting coming in, which makes it a little bit more fun. We've got a directional light here. We can always turn on things like... make sure I'm looking at the correct light here. Turn on light. That makes it really expensive, so we don't necessarily want to do that. But this is the kind of stuff that you can add to kind of add a lot of pizzazz to your environment to make your environments feel more believable and more like they are playable. And it's all stuff that contributes to GI. Anyways, I apologize. My virtual machine is going really slow, even though in parts it's actually really, really fast. So, anyways, that's going to do it for this week. I've got some homework for you guys for this week. Your homework is going to be to build out your own environment, build out your own landscape, and test out some of the stuff that I've done in this demo for this week. You'll need an environment for next week in order to hit the ground running. Otherwise, if you don't have an environment for next week, you're not going to be able to do a lot of the stuff that we are going to be demoing. So do me a favor, build an environment. I'm going to offer some points for it. Build me a landscape. Now, I don't mean a full-on environment. Build me a landscape. Your final result should look something like this. It doesn't have to be a mountain. It could be something else. Have some fun with it. Just make sure that we have something that we can use in order to actually be able to take a next step forward. Next week, what we're going to be working on is we're going to be showcasing some landmass plugin stuff, although I'm not going to require that to be used. We're going to talk about landscape materials. We're going to talk about foliage. We're going to talk about things like lakes and rivers, and we're going to review we're going to review a little bit more of the accurate sun tools, and if there's time, we'll talk a little bit about level streaming and the process by which the level streams in and out of the engine. I might set up a simple demo for that, but I'm not necessarily going to make it homework. Your homework is probably going to be create a basic outdoor environment. I might give you guys a couple of weeks to do that, but we'll see how far we get next week. All right, guys, that's going to be it. I will see you in the outro.